Hello everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm Bill Lucia, Senior Reporter with Route 50. We're glad to have you with us for our program today, Overcoming Top Workforce Challenges in State and Local Government. We're planning to touch on a wide range of areas from recruiting talent in a competitive job market to retention and training, as well as thinking about how to attract the next generation of state and local public employees. We'd like you to participate in our discussion today. So there's a button at the bottom of your console where you can feel free to submit questions, and we'll get to some of those later in the program. Following the initial discussion here, we'll be moving on to another session with our underwriter, Workday. To kick things off, I think I'm going to have each of the panelists briefly introduce themselves and talk a bit about the lens that they'll be approaching this discussion through. Rivka, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. Hi, I am Rivka Lis-Levinson from the Center for State and Local Government Excellence. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan, apolitical organization with the rather broad mission of trying to help states and localities become effective employers so that they can attract and retain a talented workforce. In my role as research director, I develop in-depth research reports on issues like workforce trends and demographics, retirement, and health and wellness benefits, and use these reports to shed light on these issues for policymakers and for the public.
Hi, I'm Maggie Mello. I'm Associate Director at the Volcker Alliance. The Volcker Alliance is a nonpartisan nonprofit based in New York City. Our mission is to advance effective management of government to achieve results that matter for citizens. And in this work, central to what I'll be talking about today is our work around the workforce, particularly our report Preparing Tomorrow's Public Service, which you can find on our website, and our work with the Government to University Initiative, shorthand G2U. Both these areas of work are focused on pipelines into government, attracting and retaining talent, and skill development and professional development for government workforce to help make government more effective.
Hi, I'm Stacy Schweikart. Most importantly, I'm very proud that I'm going on 18 years of working for the great city of Kettering, Ohio. I'm a public administrator, a practitioner in the field. I also have the opportunity to teach at the university level, to mentor students of all ages, author of a recent book about building brands and creating cultures in the public sector. I'm also a board member for the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network, a group of passionate public servants across the country. We bring the brightest minds to local government and share ideas from people working in the field about how to improve government and how to improve services to our communities.
Hi, I'm Neil Reichenberg, Executive Director of the International Public Management Association for Human Resources. We are a nonprofit membership organization based in Alexandria, Virginia, and we focus on public sector, HR management, any issues around talent, workforce, employment. We provide research, communications, publications, advocacy work, all around any issues involving workforce and talent management.
Great, thanks you guys. So I was thinking maybe we could start off by talking a little bit about recruitment. And so I figured one of the first questions I'd throw out here to the panel, what are some of the top recruitment challenges you see today in the state and local public workforce? Neil, I don't know if maybe you want to jump in on this one.
Sure. I think that we're in a very tight labor market today, and so it's creating a lot of challenges for the public sector. How can the public sector brand itself as an employer of choice and remain competitive? There are certain occupations where it's very challenging to get people, and I think that state and local governments are recognizing that they can no longer be passive recruiters, right? They have to be aggressive about going out and trying to recruit talent, so they're making a lot more use of social media platforms. They're looking at things like internships where they can bring on students either at the college level from high schools, making those connections, bringing them in, exposing them to what working in state and local government is like. They're looking at things like community events, bring people from the community together and talk about what are the opportunities there. Videos where employees can talk about why they work for government, why they enjoy working for for the government, advertising, and you know, I was at a meeting recently. We always think technology, technology, and one of our members was saying the most effective recruitment tool that they had for police officers was billboards. And if you live in an urban area like here in Washington, D.C., you spend a lot of time sitting in traffic. You have plenty of time to read those billboards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and does anybody else have thoughts on you know, some innovative ways that state and local governments have been approaching recruitment in recent years?
Yeah, at the Volcker Alliance, we kicked off our Government to University initiative this fall, which is about establishing better partnerships between universities and state and local government around a couple of areas, one of which is recruitment and talent pipelines. So we've had these conversations, and some innovative recruitment techniques have definitely popped up. Again, I think as was mentioned before, the use of videos, particularly I think the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has been really good in developing videos of their young and newer employees describing their work in the day-to-day and how it's exciting to them and how it's fulfilling to be working for government. And they've established some next-generation task forces made up of their young people in government that's proven successful and a little bit more innovative. And then some ideas that have cropped up. One that was interesting in one of our recent convenings was around having state and local government, and even with federal government, perhaps collaborate on having one kind of place or portal where people interested in government service could go to see the job opportunities across all three levels. And that was an idea that was kind of sparked recently in discussion that some people are going to look into launching.
I think a concrete example, because I know everybody watching, or you're probably looking for, you know, give me the one place I can go to really find out how to do it right. I'm going to give you an example. Cincinnati Parks. If you go to their Facebook page, or their Twitter account, their Instagram account, they do a fantastic job of capturing in video how you can make a difference by coming to work for them. And I think that the incoming generations in the workforce are naturally driven to want to make a difference. And I think that government at all levels has to really work to brand ourselves as a place that can do that. Not just brand ourselves, but we're not great at selling ourselves. And we've got to compete with really well-known philanthropic organizations, other nonprofits in the community. It's not something that we've done and done well over the years. And so I think that that's one of the struggles. So please take a look at Cincy Parks. I think that they're one of the best examples out there of concrete, quick, effective marketing.
And how about in Kettering? I mean, have you guys done anything there to try to brand yourselves, to attract these, you know, mission-driven younger employees?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, one of the things about Kettering, I'll just speak about Kettering, but this is in general about the Midwest and certainly about other parts of the country. We're fortunate. One of the main hurdles for a lot of people entering government workforce is the affordability of the communities where they want to go to work. Mm-hmm. I just heard a story yesterday of a very bright, very talented young woman who wanted to take a job working in communications for a county in Oregon. She accepted the job only to go to try to find housing and childcare and figure out she couldn't make ends meet. In the Midwest, we can do that. And I, as the person responsible for branding for the Kettering community and very active in Ohio in the City County Management Association, really leverage that it's a place that is beautiful, affordable, wonderful schools, great thriving economic conditions in many of our communities, and I think that that's what you have to brand yourself as.
Sure.
Yeah, and just to go back to kind of something that Neil said and something that Stacy said as well, and to try and link them together a bit, is, you know, Neil mentioned hard to fill positions. So our center for the past 10 years, with the support of ICMA RC, we've collaborated with IPMA HR and with NASB on a workforce survey. And what we found in our 2018 results is that the top workforce challenge that folks are facing, HR directors are reporting, is of course recruitment and retention, and especially hard to fill positions. And we found that the top 3 positions that are most difficult to fill are police, information technology, and engineering. And so I think part of that then is going to try and find a more diverse talent pool. Mm-hmm. And so if we go back then to what Stacy was saying about the brand advantage, I think that there's ways that states and localities can really be trying to appeal more to a diverse pool of applicants by appealing to mission-driven motivations for going into public service. So just as an example, our center recently came out with a report with Kronos, Workforce of the Future. And I'd really recommend that state and local government leaders take a look at the Denver case study. And just to tell you briefly about that, what we found is that Denver was dealing with the situation of a really tight labor market with a 2% unemployment rate. And so what they did to try and stand out from the crowd was they had billboards, as you mentioned, billboards on all around town, including light rail stations, that had the advertising slogan, "Be a part of the city you love." And what they found is that applicants, they had then a more talented pool of applicants. The applications increased by 10%. And when they talked to people, they found that folks were saying, we saw the slogans, we like the slogans, and we want to do work that matters. And obviously not every jurisdiction is a Denver in terms of having the resources to deploy a full-fledged advertising campaign. But I do think that there are smaller steps and more low-cost steps that jurisdictions can take. For example, changing up job descriptions, or having on just your website, doing your own brand campaigning that you can use to become an employer of choice.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, just to kind of close out this section of the discussion, I mean, Stacey, are there low-cost options that you would flag? I mean, in terms of like alternatives to doing like a large advertising campaign or something like that when you're trying to sell your brand, or
Absolutely.
to people?
Absolutely. So anybody who wants to look at a low-cost way to brand your city, visit ketteringoh.org. I'm a one-woman show, and I run our website. We publish magazines 5 times a year. Social media, interactive kind of customer service systems. And so the way that we brand it, though, is one, City Hall at your fingertips. And so that's very important. And the second way is Kettering is home. And there are a lot of places that say that, but we have sub-campaigns within all of those that explain unique attributes of our community. And I think that that's really important, that communities take a look at what they have to offer that is unique. And the same way that you would market for economic development, the same way that you would market for residential developers, is the exact same effort that you should put into recruiting for new people, new talent for your organization. And I think often new talent recruitment and marketing has been very bottom of the barrel, if it was a thought at all.
Yeah, I mean, one last thing, I guess, in this area, so thinking about the issue of job descriptions came up, and then I'm thinking also about, just the application processes and things like that. So more, I guess, thinking about the mechanical aspects of kind of applying to these jobs. I mean, is there anything you guys have seen out there that's particularly innovative around, streamlining application processes, or I mean, I guess, Rivka, you touched on the job descriptions and things along those lines, but I mean, I guess just, making the portal through which people are applying, not feel like it's from, outdated or something along those lines. I don't know if that. Stacey looks like maybe.
It's a real place of struggle, I think, for local government. It's a real place of struggle that I mean, I'll be very honest. When you go to ketteringoh.org, you still can't apply online.
Oh, okay.
And so, there are lots of hurdles. There are great civic tech companies out there that provide the service and do it exceptionally well. But there's a hesitancy because our HR systems also have to play with so many of our other systems.
Sure.
Finding the right solution in local government, in any line of government, is important. But I do think, and I think as we chatted before, if you're trying to brand yourself, and you want people to come work for you thinking that it is a place of innovation, a place of energy, a place that's forward thinking, and you're asking people to mail their resume, or drop it off in person, that's a mixed message. Right. It doesn't make it wrong, but you should at least be aware that that's a mixed message.
Sure. And I think beyond just the applicant process, it's really looking at the whole hiring process. Okay, I've been with IPMA HR now almost 4 decades, and the one thing that I have heard consistently over the years is HR is always criticized. It takes too long to hire someone. Okay, and I really think you need to look at that whole process. How can you streamline it? Because remember, HR does not own the whole hiring process. Hiring managers are involved in looking at, how can we streamline it? How can we make it shorter? Because in the private sector, they can make instant offers, and in government they can't. And you're going to lose a lot of top talent because they don't want to wait the length of time. So beyond just the application process, and I think you need to streamline that, it's how can we make the whole process more efficient, and how can we hold everyone accountable to make sure that, you know, when a list goes to the hiring managers, that they don't sit on it for 20, 30 days before they schedule interviews, you know, so that the whole process, so that everyone has ownership and accountability of the hiring process.
And we know that there's, you know, limitations to, let's say, what localities can do on some of the hiring, you know, front with the whole process. But I think one thing that people can do is also do a little bit of a better job at communicating with applicants. So you have a process that may take a while, but are you reaching out to people and telling them where in the process they are? And so if you're trying to compete with other sectors where they're having kind of a faster response time, especially kind of in this day and age where people are used to such quick responses with email and internet and just kind of immediate feedback, if it kind of goes into this black hole, that's really going to turn people off and think, this isn't a place I want to work. So it's not, for me, it's also, you know, in addition to trying to make the process faster, it's what are you doing to tell people where they're at in the process, what's coming next, and, you know, how are you being responsive to people's interest in kind of hearing back from you?
Yeah, I would say in our conversations in G2U with the students in the room and the recent graduates who have talked from the applicant perspective, the biggest complaints we heard from them was around not just speed but transparency, just feeling like they put their resume into a black hole and they have no idea if they're still in consideration, what the next step is. And so we talked a lot about, you know, can these sites just enable a chat function so you can chat with a recruiter who can maybe answer those questions on the spot. But we also talked about how in the short term, if you can't get around a maybe clunky, bad website, you can still layer things that are helpful on top of that. So, you know, the best ambassador sometimes for local and state government is having an employee who currently works in state and local government who's really high performing, really impassioned about their work there, someone like you, who can go out into the community and answer questions on campuses, at hiring fairs, and other opportunities to be the face of the government, to be the face of the recruiter, to kind of drive the applicant pool, and that person can maybe be a point of contact for applicants to answer questions when they are frustrated with the website. But if you can't get around the website in the short term, there's, you know, certainly things you can maybe add, as you were also alluding to.
Absolutely.
I think that we hear all the time as we talk to professionals who are trying to move in the field, move around, or break into the field for the first time, that they are very frustrated with everything that was mentioned, the time and the lack of information.
Right.
And it is such a contrast to what they find in other application processes that they're going through, that unfortunately what happens is that we're losing very talented people because they get turned off before they even get an interview. And it's something that I think all of us in government have to be responsible for if we know that collectively we're all facing a serious shortage in the workforce.
Has anybody, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and even just thinking about from the business case for this, we know that the costs of turnover are enormous.
Right.
And so even if it seems like, wow, this is going to cost something to kind of try and streamline the hiring process, the costs of turnover and of not having good talent are more than the costs of trying to improve your hiring system. So I think there needs to be some, you know, acceptance of the idea that there needs to be some investment in this as a process if you're trying to, in the end, save money. It may not be right away, but I think if you're struggling with how to talk with leadership about it, that I think coming at it from the, you know, perspective of the business case for why you need to streamline the process, that may be a way to go.
Sure. Is there a local government or a state that's really kind of knocking it out of the park right now in terms of, you know, sort of narrowing the gap between, you know, what the private sector hiring process is like and the public sector process is like? Any examples that come to mind, or? It's fine if not. Okay, so moving on, I guess, from recruitment, you know, so once you've hired, retention then becomes an issue, and so, you know, I guess to start out, maybe, Could any of you talk about like how much of a problem is retention right now? I mean, what evidence do we have that there is high turnover in government, that it is actually a problem?
Yeah, I think the problem is, and we do an annual employment outlook survey where we ask our members, are you planning to hire, and in what areas? And we've added recently questions around turnover, retention questions, and where I think it becomes a real issue is that almost 50% of the voluntary turnover, not including retirements, is from people with less than 3 years of experience, okay? And why that becomes a huge issue is that you're investing a lot. Let's take the example of police departments. They're putting police officers through academies. They're very expensive. They're finally getting them up to a point where they're going to get a return on that investment. If they walk out the door, they lose all of that, okay? And the cost of turnover and recruitment, there's a lot involved there. So I think where it is a big issue is those people early in their career, and I think that's where the real issue is, and where you need to put some resources towards.
One of the places that we talked about that is really, I know at least in our area of the country, in local government organizations, a place where their positions are very hard to fill, is emergency positions, fire and police. Fire in particular, and that this is unique sort of to the way that departments have been set up. I'll use us as an example. For a long time, we had a combined part-time and full-time department. Well, we're the great city of Kettering, Ohio, and we grow great firefighters. And so people would come to work for us in a part-time capacity and build their resume. We would invest in all of their training. Our full-time positions were limited, and our part-time turnover was really, really hurting us, because then what do we have to do? We have to use overtime and full-time capacity to backfill for that. And so we have shifted our model, but also done a huge recruiting campaign and some partnerships all the way down to the career tech program with our high school to start a fire academy for high school students, so that we're introducing people to the careers earlier. That's a great model for all of local government, really, if you think about it, is to reach down. I know you've talked about your programs. ELGL does a program called ELGL Inspire. We visit about 10 college campuses a year with the goal of bringing professionals to interact with undergraduate and graduate students to bring public service to life, to hear almost in a TEDx style what I do every day, and share that if you're an engineer or an accountant or an HR professional, all of these areas that disciplines that you think you might want to explore when you leave college, you can do all of those jobs in government. And so please consider that as a place where you can make a difference.
Right.
Yeah, and in the Volcker Alliance's research in Preparing Tomorrow's Public Service, one of our interesting findings in that report was the importance of peer networks and mentorship. And we found in that report, we got feedback from over 1,000 rising leaders in government across the country, federal, state, and local levels. And those who identified as having a trusted mentor and a community of peers were much more likely to also identify as feeling like they're meeting their career goals. So I think there's a lot of power in mentoring programs and peer networks and community of peers when it comes to retaining workforce. And I think that like ELGL, groups like that, which helped us on that report as well, young government leaders, those kinds of professional membership associations are excellent places to get that community of peers and to get mentorship, as well as the programs that governments and government agencies themselves can establish within their structures.
And when you're talking about kind of the workers who are within the first few years, as you mentioned, that are, kind of trying it out and leaving, I think the other thing that's important is that there's not kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. I think sometimes there's a bit of an overemphasis in terms of thinking that, this next generation coming in, the millennials, they're so different than the baby boomers and the Gen Xers, and they all want this. And so I think that there needs to be a better understanding that I think rather than it being a generation issue, that it's more of a life cycle event issue. And so if you have 3 employees coming in who are 30, you have one of them is paying off student loan debts, one of them is trying to buy a house and start a family, and one of them is caring for an older parent. And for all of them, they have different needs and different things that are going to be attractive for them. So I think that it's with retention that there's some ideas that maybe what you need is more casual attire at the office and to cater lunches, and maybe that works for some people, but I think that it's maybe not giving enough credit to the next generation and oversimplifying by saying that everybody wants this, and instead that customizing benefits to fit the needs, and so there's the piece where you also then have to assess the needs of your workforce. What is it that people want? What are the benefits that you can provide that can help them? And to going back to what we were talking about earlier, of just being the employer of choice. So what can you do on that front?
And along similar lines, I mean, where do you guys see opportunities in terms of letting people sort of move around within government, things along those lines? I mean, that seems like one way to let people grow in their careers and maybe stick with their job longer.
And I think that's something government does not do particularly well, is to let people know what are the myriad opportunities within government, because even if you're working for a state agriculture department, they're not just hiring people focused on agriculture. They're hiring IT people, finance people, HR people. And so really government needs to tell people you can have multiple careers all within the same employer, this government entity. And I'm not sure that they do a good job of that. I mean, it's always this thing of, well, you have to get promoted up into a managerial supervisory role as opposed to moving people this way into different careers that they have. And I think offering those rotational assignments where people can move around and experience different opportunities, mentorships. I think people really value that. Opportunities to serve on task forces or committees that may expose them to other parts of the organization and may engage them in different ways is really something that can overall help the retention. And the point Rivka was making, I really think it's important that we treat everyone as individuals. I mean, it always bothers me because we tend to stereotype, particularly the younger generation. We're stereotyping millions of people. Okay, and if we did that for other groups in the employment situation, we would rightfully be sued for discrimination. So I really think we need to keep that in mind.
I think if there's one thing that I could leave everybody with today is that the modern workforce, regardless of your generation, sees careers more like climbing a tree than a ladder. And I'm a perfect example. I've been with the city where I work for almost 18 years. I hope I finish my career there. And I hope that because I've had the freedom to move from running youth leadership programs to a senior center with senior transportation, full-scale community-wide programs, and now I'm responsible for communication and branding out of the city manager's office. And I think what governments have to do better is identify utility players, to look at their workforce and find the people. In the book I just released, I talk about something that I call the leadership vortex, and it's a method that you can use in your organization to look at potential leaders and how do you spot them? How do you watch things that happen day to day and know, ooh, that's somebody that I need to give a chance to branch out? Those are your utility players. And so if you can create opportunities, exactly like you said, task force groups, working as a liaison with a community group, any of these kinds of things, if you can't give a promotion or a title increase, I say all the time, give me a new challenge. That's what I really want. And I think that the utility players and the passionate public servants out there want to climb a tree, and there's a branch next to me that I really want to explore, and all I need is the green light to go ahead and do it.
That can be tough though, right? I mean, especially if you're talking about people moving between agencies where maybe there's some siloing going on. I mean, any examples you guys have seen of places that have done a good job breaking down those barriers or working across departments, things like that, or other efforts?
Sounds like the city of Kettering.
I think it's really, really challenging. And I think exactly what this is not something that we do well.
Right.
Ladders are well ingrained
Sure.
into government organizations and hierarchies within all of our agencies and organizations. And it will take a massive cultural shift to put away the ladders and to free up space for people to move back and forth and explore. There's another concept that we talk about, and I'm going to say, I admitted that I've been with the city 18 years and I hope I never leave. So as much as we are struggling to get new professionals into the field and then dealing with turnover once we do get them in our organizations, we also need to be very realistic that we have people who have worked for our organizations for 20 plus years. And they're not going anywhere because they've made it to the spot on the ladder that they want. And so then you have people underneath them with energy and ideas, and there's no way for them to move into a position to be able to explore those. And so one of the concepts that I really believe in is reboarding, is taking some of those employees who've been with your organization for 15, 20, maybe even 25 years, and say to them, you've been here a long time, and government, our organization, what we do and the way we serve has changed so dramatically in those 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And so what we'd love to do is sort of put you through an academy with a group of your peers who have been here for a while and help you learn how we're doing things now in all these different parts of our organization. Perhaps do this at a regional level so that many organizations collaborate and they could learn how maybe the county where you are is doing it or the state organizations near you. And that would then maybe open their eyes to a new place they might like to explore as a next part of their career. Or stay with you with an all-new energy and an all-new insight and excitement about doing the work that they came to years and years ago.
Okay.
And another piece of that is just, thinking about also the institutional knowledge then that all those folks have.
Right.
And so what are you doing? Maybe part of the challenge or new responsibilities can also be imparting some of that knowledge to the next generation, because we all know about the silver tsunami that's coming,
Allegedly.
But it will come eventually, and you are going to need, there is going to be a lot of knowledge that's going to be lost unless people are actively figuring out ways to have folks work together who've been there for 2 years and 20 years, and not just in a kind of supervisee role, but also being able to exchange information and the kinds of skills that they have, and to make sure that when people do retire, that there are going to be other people who are ready to pick up the slack and to continue on with the important work that people have been doing for 20 plus years.
Sure. So actually, we've got a couple of audience questions coming in. One of them is it's a viewer who says, in their area, the hardest positions to fill are labor-intensive at the lower end of the pay scale, and if anybody has ideas on how they might attract younger workers to fill those sorts of positions.
I would say don't assume that you're going to attract younger workers. So that is one of the things that I think we have seen, and I know lots of organizations are seeing, that in particular the part-time or full-time entry positions that are labor intensive. One of our biggest struggles is actually with our park service team and our seasonal summer help. And for a long time we targeted college students. Well, for the wage that we pay and the early hours you have to work, there are a lot of other options out there.
Right.
And so one of the major shifts that we did as an organization is to recognize that there are some recent retirees who might like something to do during the summer months and then have their winters free. That we really, again, just like everything else, when you limit your scope to one age group for any reason in the workforce, you're limiting your options. And so really think broadly about all the potential. And the other thing with those labor-intensive positions, there have been some major impacts for government organizations as a result of recent shifts in the healthcare law about the number of hours that you can work. And the result is that some of those positions got divvied up even further. So you don't get the number of hours that you want part-time, or it becomes full-time, and then for it to be a full-time position, there's a whole other host of requirements and things that have to be met. And so I think it's really being open about who you're recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
It also may be an opportunity to think about the gig economy and thinking about, for certain positions where that makes sense, that you have people for a temporary project or for something going on where you're then for different skilled trades. can you look to see if there are people who would like to do this job who are not looking for, let's say, a full-time position with the organization? Obviously, that won't work for everything. I know none of us want police and firefighters from the gig economy, but but you know, for certain skilled trades, I think that is an option that I know we're funding from our research is on the rise. So I think that's something that, you know, we're definitely continuing to look at and see how they're being utilized. So that would be another option.
I also think you might want to look at populations that have struggled to get employment. I know Hennepin County has a Pathways program. There was a great article in Route 50. I'm sure people can go on the website and access it, written by Timothy Clark, that talked in great detail about Hennepin County's Pathways program, and you know, and they set that up really to help people that have struggled with employment, and the positive results of that are that it's increased the diversity of their workforce. They've gotten people out of poverty, off public assistance. I believe they've had about 619 people graduate from the program. They've hired over 200 within the county. Private sector employers are hiring those people. Other governments are hiring the people, and so they're really giving back to the community, and you know, and that might be a strategy when you look at some positions that you're really struggling to try to fill. You know, so certainly the Hennepin County example might be one people might want to look at.
Great. And so another question we have here, this actually gets into another area I was hoping to touch on. How could paid parental leave play into employee recruitment and retention, and are there any good examples from local governments? And you know, I think here also, if there are just other examples, sort of like on the benefit front or things along those lines, where local governments or states are using, you know, flexible benefits or more non-traditional benefits, things along those lines to try and attract or retain workers. We could touch on that as well, but.
So I think there's two things I would mention with that. So one is in the Workforce of Tomorrow report that I mentioned, Workforce of the Future, sorry, with
report titles are similar.
Very similar. Workforce of the Future project that we worked on with Kronos, one of the interviews that we conducted with one of the localities talked about how they had paid parental leave starting immediately upon hire. And so that was something that was really a huge recruitment tool for them in terms of people just, you know, being in all different situations, and that was something that was really appealing. The other thing I would say in terms of non-traditional benefits is another project that we're working on with Wells Fargo is on financial literacy programs. And so one of the things that we're finding, just our preliminary results, is that there is a lot to still be done in this area, that state and local governments really have a ways to go in terms of offering financial literacy programs. But what I think is that it's something that employees are really wanting. The studies are showing that people are looking for help with their financial decision making. So to the extent that places can offer things like financial literacy programs that not every local government is offering, that gives them a competitive advantage.
I would say I think it's really important, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I think it's really important to again look at the full spectrum of life and to consider generous leave policies around caregiving. And so caregiving would include parental leave, and you asked for a great example. The City of Dayton, Mayor Nan Whaley, has instituted, I think, one of the strongest and most progressive parental leave policies. Parental leave means it's not maternity leave, right? So it's parental leave. It qualifies for births and adoptions and fostering, and it is for same-sex partners. There's a wide range. It's for grandparents. And so I think that that's a really great policy. In fact, in the first year that it was in place, the majority of individuals in their workforce who took advantage were male firefighters. It creates a loyalty. And I'm going to tell you just very, very quickly a reason that I hope I never leave Kettering. And there are a lot of reasons, but honestly, it's because I'm loyal to Kettering. My son was born 5 weeks early. In fact, my water broke 12 weeks early. And so I made it in the hospital on paid leave with full support of my employer to have a healthy baby. Fast forward several years, my father had cancer and fought a long battle, and my employer gave me the space and the leave to spend his last 3 months at his doctor's appointments, in the hospital, caring for him, recognizing that I was still going to be a high performer and I was still going to contribute to the organization, but I'm a whole person. And so that created a loyalty, and I will tell you that any organization out there that does that is going to end up with a workforce that is loyal to them in a way that they could never pay for in the form of any insurance policy or leave benefit policy.
And I think too, in general, by comparison to the private sector, government is known, has a reputation for having a much better work-life balance. Of course, there's always exceptions to that, but I think, if you're trying to hire a budget analyst for your city who also has an offer from a private sector bank, chances are they'd have much more reasonable working hours on the public sector job than the private sector job, driven by profit margins, and they might have more vacation time, more just the full package of the work-life balance. Same thing with other jobs that are very demanding travel schedules that take you away from family and home. I think there are opportunities there to paint a more complete picture of the day-to-day and what the job looks like and the benefits outside the paycheck.
Work-life blend.
Right.
It's not, there's no such thing as balance.
Yeah.
It's just how well do you have the space to blend the two together. It's really important.
And you can really think, when we're talking about outside the box, non-traditional, I think even things like having, people who offer personal leave, let's say, but what you can also offer is things like a day where folks can do civic engagement projects. So you have a whole workforce of people who are passionate about helping others. So even if it's, the same amount of leave that you're giving it, positioning it as an opportunity for people to do hobbies or take care of other things that are important to them, that's another way to kind of make it that you're more appealing to what it is that the individuals are looking for, rather than just kind of this blanket, here's our leave.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we got another audience question. This one about succession planning. And so the question is, we all know the risk of the silver tsunami and the concern for information loss, loss of institutional knowledge. Have any of you experienced or seen or implemented strategies for succession planning? So yeah, I mean, we haven't really gotten into that yet, I guess, too deeply. I mean, so knowing that there is this older generation of workers that's leaving, there's the younger generation you guys are trying to recruit. What are some good strategies around building some overlap there so that we're not losing tons of institutional knowledge at the state and local level?
Yeah, I think I resemble the silver tsunami. I think that there isn't a one-size-fits-all strategy on that, and I think it's not just saying, well, how do we prepare if someone in a senior position is going to leave to make sure we have that person, but rather it's a pipeline, right? Mm-hmm. And so you need to start here in working on developing people to move them along. If you wait and say, well, we're just going to develop for that senior position, it's probably going to be too late. We've talked previously about the need of the institutional knowledge that's going to go out the door, and how do we make sure that we capture that. And then I think it's not just succession planning, but rather workforce planning overall, with succession planning being part of it, to look at, well, what does the workforce going to look like in the future? What are the positions we need? How is technology going to impact the workforce of the future? Because there are multiple reports out there about how either jobs are going to be eliminated or jobs are going to be changing, and what are we doing to make sure that we retrain, reskill people? And so I think it's a variety of things. We've done some research around it. The good news is that more state and local governments today are focusing on workforce and succession planning, but it's still not at the level that it really needs to be at, given all the demographics that are out there. But I really think it's around development, having that pipeline, making sure that you're capturing the knowledge, and and again, government can't really pre-select people, right? In the private sector, they can pre-select you, but in government, they can't. So there's challenges around that government faces that can also be daunting.
Mm-hmm. I think if you have an organization of tree climbers,
right,
you're going to naturally be able to identify people who have the skills to move into those positions. But also, if you have shifted your organization to have a little bit more of that freedom of movement, to break down some of those silos and some of the hierarchy, what ends up happening is that the institutional knowledge is also going to flow more freely. And so I think that that's really, really, really important for multiple reasons, but I think you're going to end up not being in such a panic. The other thing, if I could wave my wand and have the money and the resources for every jurisdiction, every agency to create a handful of generalist positions that aren't siloed into a discipline, that aren't in one specific area, but have one of those great titles like strategist or management analyst, or call them problem solver. I mean, doesn't matter. But if every organization could have 2, 3, 12 of those people taking issues from all over the organization and trying to figure out how they could shift the pieces to make it all work better, those people are then going to understand so many different parts of the organization. And as management opportunities become available, they're ready with a broad knowledge of the organization.
Right. Yeah, and it seems like this also fits under the, we talked a little bit earlier about mentoring. I mean, it seems like with succession planning, there's a really good opportunity to sort of meet the appetite that like a new generation of workers might have for mentoring opportunities, and also bridge the institutional knowledge divide, right?
And you may also be able to have someone who's leaving who may not be ready just to sit on the porch in the rocking chair. You know, and if you could provide some type of a transitional part-time where they come back simply to mentor.
You just read my mind.
Their successor. Right?
Yeah.
And you know that could be so valuable. You know, they're not a threat to the new person. They've already retired, but you bring them back on a part-time, temporary basis. And I know there are issues around different state and local pension systems that may prevent that or limit that. But if you can work around that, I think that
it can be done.
Yeah.
And it's very powerful when it happens.
Right. So one thing we didn't get too much into with the last little bit of time we have left, I'm wondering if anybody has some brief thoughts just on jobs that you think either would be created or eliminated or fundamentally changed by technology. I don't know if we want to just kind of do a lightning round sort of thing with the last minute or two we have left here. Anything along those lines?
I think the jobs that most frequently come to mind as being eliminated are the ones that are purely clerical. But I think for a vast majority of jobs, there's a lot of research out there that shows it's not that they're going to be eliminated or created, but just their basket of responsibilities will be changed. The stuff that will be able to be automated will be automated, and what they're left with are the tasks that are really reliant on very strong interpersonal skills, knowing how to motivate yourself in your team, and how to kind of persevere in adverse situations, and a lot of those kind of so-called soft skills, EQ type skills, and that really came through in our Preparing for Tomorrow's Public Service report as well.
Sure.
I think that technology is going to create a demand for more people in positions like mine. Communication, but also sort of a utility player who understands multiple departments. And as technology creates better opportunities for us to engage our communities, we have to be able to explain to our constituents how that works, how to approach us, how we serve them using technology. And there's nothing that replaces written word and being out in the public to do that.
Sure. Anybody else have thoughts? Or okay. Well, I think that about does it for our conversation. Thank you all for your excellent insights. We're going to turn it over now to Route 50's associate publisher, Alex Treadway, and for a brief session with our underwriter, Workday. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Rivka and Stacy, Maggie, and Neil. That was a very insightful conversation about workforce technology problems and human resource problems in state and local government. We really appreciate hearing that, and it was a great panel and very lively. Thank you so much for that. I'm Alex Treadway. I'm the associate publisher of Route 50, and I'm excited to continue the conversation right now with Sherry Amos. Sherry is the Director of Market Development, Education, and Government at Workday. Sherry is responsible for delivering products, solutions, and services to a vast number of government offices. Before we dive into the topic at hand, let's get a sense of how you got to be where you are today and what you're up to.
Thank you, Alex. Well, I have been in the technology business for many years, always serving public sector clients, and I've seen a few changes in technologies from mainframes all the way through to the cycle we're in today, which is moving to the cloud. Everything is moving to the cloud. So I'm very excited to be with you and continue our discussion about other trends that we see amongst our customers as well as across the industry.
And let's start with that. I mean, based off of the panel we just listened to, what do you see as some of the trends that are really impacting governments in terms of recruiting and hiring new talent?
Well, I think certainly our panelists had a lot of insight about what the challenges are, and from how we look at sort of the world of what our clients are trying to do, we think about these in terms of being really unified processes. And so if we think about recruit, hire, we would add onboarding to that process, because that's often a challenge area for public sector. And it's really about how can you apply modern technologies to these really unified business processes to make everyone as efficient as possible. And we see a lot of significant reduction in the time it takes to recruit, hire, and onboard. You know, when you're incorporating mobile technologies,
right,
self-service capabilities with your employees, with your managerial staff, and they really have the ability to take immediate action. Things don't have to sit on someone's desk. So we see a lot of those trends going on, and we see a lot of benefit in that area. And again, a lot of reduction in the onboarding. When you can really onboard a new hire before they've ever set foot in the office, and it's time to productivity and they're ready to go, those are some of the things we're trying to help our customers with.
I'm glad to hear that, because if you recall in the last panel, they had trouble coming up with a group that was doing that well. So it's great to hear that. So let me ask this question. Of the public sector employees that are watching us right now, who do you think is the most impacted by these challenges?
I think often the most impacted, not only by these challenges, but also by the silver tsunami, which is picking up again after the economic recession, you know,
right,
started to come back. It's really supervisory and middle management layers that are most impacted, I think. And so when we talk to our clients about what they're trying to do, not only strategically in terms of their entire workforce, but how they're trying to enable their employees, but it's also these ideas of how really can they enable their management layer to be more effective, to be more strategic, to make decisions in a much more timely fashion.
So what do you think our audience watching should consider when it comes to training or building new skills in employees and matching interests for career progression? I
think, again, it's this concept of thinking about really unified business processes and the technology, in our case, that enables those. One of our prior panelists mentioned the fact that their systems simply don't communicate. I think it was the applicant system, and someone drops off a resume, it goes into a black hole, they don't know what happens with it. But in terms of skills training, retention, it's when you have that 360-degree view of everyone in your workforce, every employee, every manager, and you can match skills to interest, you can match skills to open positions. That's what we're seeing really makes a difference. And I know we touched a little bit on sort of succession planning and leadership.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have an opportunity to come back to that as well.
Oh, I do. And you know, it's interesting. And my next question is really probably 4 questions all in one. So we'll probably break it apart a little bit.
All right.
The way I was thinking about it, I had written down the question, can you tell me a little bit more about how HR professionals should think about new ways to engage and retain employees? And then I wrote down plan for managerial succession and consider internal as well as external career paths. That's like 4 different questions. So let's start with, can you think of the new ways to engage and retain employees? And then we'll jump to plan for managerial succession.
Well, I think engagement is critical, and we heard a little bit about that before. And retention also, it's understanding sort of where people are in that cycle. What kind of tools are you giving them to get their job done? You know, whether those are strategies, multidimensional strategies for recruiting, for instance, or whether it's being able to identify an employee early on that might be a retention risk that
right,
you don't know about today. And when you can give managers capabilities for those kind of things, and you can see, again, across your workforce using things like analytics, some powerful analytics,
right,
you know, how have we retained people who were at risk of turnover? And we talked about the ladder. Not everyone wants to be promoted up the ladder,
right,
right? Sometimes they just want an opportunity to move and do something else interesting. And so analytics come into play a great deal when you're looking at those kind of things in the workforce.
It's true. I was really interested in hearing Stacey talk about the tree versus the ladder.
Absolutely.
And I thought that was very great. That was a good analogy. So then let's jump to it. Let's talk about the problem with managerial succession, and let's talk about this gray tsunami a little bit. Is it real? Is it going to happen? And what are people needing to get ready for?
Well, I certainly think it's real. I think it is starting to happen. Our clients are beginning to see it pick up. You know, I think In past years, the estimates were in many public sector organizations somewhere between 25 and 40% of their workforce was eligible to retire. Those things are picking up, and so it is becoming critical to now begin to plan for that, that next generation managerial layer. But I always heard in many, succession planning, we can't use those words. Those aren't good words. It appears that someone's being pre-selected, as our other panelists said. But I spoke with a very innovative commissioner of HR a couple of years ago, and her attitude was, we've got a problem, we have to solve it. If it isn't prohibited in statute or an employment contract, I'm going to try it. And she simply changed the word succession planning to leadership development. And she created an entire program where every agency nominated, high-performing employees or utility players, as we heard before, and they've created a whole pipeline of leaders that are now capable of moving into those kind of roles.
Right, and I noticed they talked about offering different task force or other ways, or not just a job promotion or money, but another way to get that employee excited, but also to see them in multiple roles and keep the institutional knowledge. I thought that was fascinating. And then let's talk about how you consider internal as well as external career paths.
Well, again, first of all, it starts with a strategic plan about your workforce.
Right.
What do you need, not only today, but going into the future? And we are seeing elected leaders become much more interested in this topic. They used to leave that just to administrators. But I'm aware of one state that hired a futurist to help them chart out how they think state government will change over the course of the next 15 years. And so it's first taking that strategic look.
Right.
What do you need in your workforce? And then what kind of skills do you need? What do you have? And some of the prior things we've talked about, how do you match those up with what you're going to need?
So then that blends perfectly into my next question, which is, what do you see as a major shift in the strategic role of HR management within government?
I think one of the major shifts, a couple of major shifts we've seen those who are really innovative and are using some of the new technology capabilities, mobile analytics, Workday, et cetera. They have really shifted the level of focus that's spent on helping people just process transactions. Self-service can take over a lot of that. And they are now freeing up HR professionals to focus more on being strategic partners with their agencies and work some more on these strategic kind of problems. And we also see that when they're thinking about what they need in terms of new technologies, whatever, it's not just what your requirements are today. You have to think about how that will move with you in the future and what you need in the future.
So then how would you say your customers can manage the value from their technology investments?
We see many of our customers manage the value at first by benchmarking where they start and sort of what they have after they put a new solution into production. But it's really about the continuous innovation that they get in order to always be on the most current release, to always be consuming innovative capabilities within the technology. And it really carries them into the future, and they no longer get stuck on the hockey stick, type activity where you're on a version 5 years ago that isn't maintained today. So we see a lot of measurement of value. We have a group within Workday that helps our customers do that.
Excellent. If there was a single takeaway that you want this group to come away from both the panel and from our discussion, what's that takeaway?
Well, I think it's two things. It's where does strategy meet, transactional support? And you really have to start with a strong strategy for your organization, and then you have to map to that. And the second point would be what I just said. You have to think about into the future. What do you need to do into the future? Yes, there are some challenges you have to solve today, but really what is your workforce going to look like, and how are you going to support them into the future?
Sherry, thank you so much.
Thank
I really
you so
appreciate
much.
your time
It's a delight
today.
to be here.
And thank you to our audience for tuning in. This event would not be possible without the generous contribution of our underwriter, Workday, so thank you very much to Workday as well. And then the full viewcast has been recorded, so you will receive a link to watch it again in your email inbox later this week. We encourage you to let your colleagues know about this and encourage them to tune in as well. Send them a link. And thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.